My daughter emptied my bank account, threw me in a care home, and never looked back. But secrets don't die in old women, and I had hers buried deep in a shoebox, ready to ruin her little empire with one anonymous email. See how I turned everything around? My name is Margaret Drennan. I'm 74, though I only say it when I want a discount or pity, and I prefer neither. I used to be a nurse, wound care mostly. You learn a lot about people when you're the one changing their bandages. They'll lie to their doctor, lie to their spouse, but when someone kneels at your feet with gloves on and gauze in hand, the truth slips out like breath in winter. I suppose that's why I never trusted kindness, unless it came with a sting. My daughter never stung. That should have warned me. Let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Mickey Harvey from Texas. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. The day I lost everything started with blueberry muffins and the smell of warm plastic. That kind of sterile vinyl scent that wraps around bank chairs, nursing homes, and the back seats of cars nobody wants to sit in for long. We were at her credit union, hers not mine. She brought me there with a bright red binder and a too cheerful tone, calling it estate simplification. Said it was to make things easier in case anything ever happened. I was still walking a mile every morning and cutting my own lawn. But she looked at me like I was already halfway under dirt. We sat across from a girl named Erica who couldn't have been more than 25. My daughter, Claire, smiled and touched my hand as Erica slid over a stack of forms, each page loaded with dense legal code dressed up in harmless fonts. Claire had already filled out most of it. I just had to sign. Just putting everything under one roof, she said. Streamlines access if something ever happens. She said if not when. And that subtle kindness, thinking I might still last, was what made me sign. That, and the exhaustion that creeps in when you've spent most of your life doing what people need instead of what you want. I should have read every line. I should have asked why she insisted on closing my old accounts, why she needed full power of attorney, why she kept checking her phone between sentences. But there was that smile. That calm, motherly tone she'd inherited from me, and then sharpened into a weapon. I thought maybe she was just trying to take care of things the way I once took care of her. Maybe she was. But taking care of someone and disposing of them aren't so different when you're skilled at both. 2 weeks later, she dropped me off at Pine Hill Residence with a suitcase and a kiss on the forehead. Just for a little while, Mom. They'll help with the arthritis. And it gives me time to get the house fixed up for you. That leaky pipe? Finally getting it looked at. She told the receptionist I had early-stage forgetfulness. I don't. Not even a little. I remember everything. Like the way she didn't look back when the nurse took my hand. Like the way she signed the paperwork in my stead, sloppy, rushed. It didn't match my signature, but it matched hers. 2 more weeks passed before I called the bank myself. The number had changed. I was locked out. My name had been removed from nearly everything except a tiny pension account she'd left untouched. Maybe to look generous if someone asked. The house. Sold. She'd listed it under a trust name I didn't recognize and transferred it before she moved me here. The nurse who helped me with the call said, "It happens more than you'd think." I didn't cry. That was what surprised me most. I didn't feel grief or even rage. I felt something colder. Something that sat quietly at the base of my spine and said, "She forgot who you were. But you remember who she is." And that, God help me, made me smile. Because there's a thing she doesn't know. A night she doesn't remember, or rather, never knew happened. It was 10 years ago in late December. Snow slushed the gutters and I got a call around midnight. Her husband, Neil, too drunk to drive, stranded after some office party. I picked him up. He reeked of bourbon and expensive cologne, and as I drove, he told me things no man should ever confess to his mother-in-law. About Claire. About the way she worked people. The money. The partnerships. The lies. He laughed as he said it like he was proud of surviving her. Then he passed out in my passenger seat, and I made a choice I never told anyone about. I took his phone. Just for a moment. Just long enough to forward an email thread to myself. One Claire had sent him by accident, meant for her business partner. It was about a deal. Fraudulent. Big. It disappeared the next day, covered in a new LLC with an innocent name. But the forwarded copy? It's still mine. Still sitting in a little printed folder in the bottom of a shoebox. I taped shut with masking tape and labeled winter clothes in my attic. Except it's not in the attic anymore. I brought it here. Folded in my bathrobe, inside a zippered pouch with lavender sachet and my mother's rosary. And she doesn't know. She thinks I'm gone. Just another old woman fading out of relevance. Decaying in a place that smells like lemon bleach and forgotten birthdays. But secrets don't die in old women. They wait. And the thing about people who lie for a living is, they always forget the ones they lied to, especially if they once loved them. Pine Hill Residence is the kind of place built for polite decline. Everything's beige, walls, floors, furniture. Even the sky somehow looks washed out through the thick, fingerprint-smeared windows. They put up seasonal decorations, but it's always the same plastic garlands looped above doorframes like we're meant to pretend the holidays mean something here. The staff is kind in the way flight attendants are kind, trained, efficient, already gone before you know what you needed. But if you smile and nod and don't make noise, you become invisible. And invisibility has its uses. I stopped asking for explanations after the first week. Instead, I listened. You'd be surprised how quickly people talk around someone who seems confused. I didn't need to fake all of it. My knees ached. My hands shook in the morning. I forgot words sometimes, mostly when I was tired. But I remembered the shoebox. I remembered every email I printed and tucked between layers of old bills and postcards. I remembered Neil's voice, slurry and smug, telling me how Claire doctored a contract to screw over their supplier, and how that idiot never noticed. I remembered enough. They assigned me a room at the far end of the West Wing. Shared at first until my roommate died in her sleep a few days later. Heart failure, they said. Her name was Evelyn, and her son never came to collect her things. They packed them into 2 garbage bags and wheeled them out during dinner. The bed was stripped, cleaned, and redressed before dessert was served. Vanilla pudding. Always vanilla. It stuck in my throat that night, thick and flavorless. That's the thing about these places. Even grief is processed quietly, hygienically, like everything else. After Evelyn, I asked to keep the room private. They said I'd need approval. I got it. All it took was a lost medication slip, and a soft little panic in the lobby to draw sympathy from the director. You just need space, Margaret, he said, patting my hand. We'll take care of you. I nodded, smiled. Meanwhile, I was already moving things out of the bathroom cabinet to make space for the shoebox. I'd wrapped it in a tattered scarf I knitted back in the 80s, blue with gold trim. No one looked twice when I brought it in. They thought I was sentimental. And I am. Just not in the ways they think. I didn't open it. Not yet. Just knowing it was there gave me a kind of quiet leverage. Power even. Every time I saw Claire's face in a magazine article or a morning news segment, Local Woman Wins Award for Innovative Family Support Program, I'd smile. The shoebox made her life feel smaller. Manageable. Like something I could press a thumb into until it broke apart. That's when I started leaving notes. I wrote tiny messages on the back of outdated library checkout cards. Things like, she took everything and called it love, or power of attorney should never mean abandonment. I slipped them into books from the common room, cookbooks, devotionals, crossword collections. None of them were signed. None of them mentioned Claire by name. But the act felt like proof that I still existed. That my truth was finding tiny roots, however quiet, in this place built to erase us. Then one day I saw Claire on the news again. This time giving a speech in front of a clean white banner that read Families First. Empowering loved ones to care without guilt. I stood in the TV room, surrounded by half-sleeping residents and the hum of an old radiator, and I laughed. Out loud. Not loud enough for staff to notice, but enough that the woman beside me glanced over and said, "She looks like your daughter." "She used to be," I replied, and I meant it. In the evenings, I'd sit by the window with my tea, facing the parking lot. A few residents still had visitors. Grandkids with scruffy beards, exhausted daughters, sometimes the rare son who looked like he didn't want to be here at all. I never saw Neil. Not once. He wasn't the type to return favors. Claire either. She called exactly twice in those first 3 months. Both times she made sure I knew how hard she was working, how she was still dealing with the estate stuff, and how I should focus on healing. Healing from what she didn't say. Probably from her. I started requesting things. Small things. A library card. Then a personal email account. To stay in touch with old friends, I told the tech girl who set it up for me. She smiled like she thought I'd forget the password in a week. I didn't. I used it to reset an old login she didn't know I had. An email linked to an alias Claire, once used for private contracts, before the nonprofit went legitimate. She must have forgotten all about it. Or thought it was too buried to matter. But nothing is buried deep enough when someone knows what they're looking for. Every so often, I'd hear a resident mention a son who stopped coming, a daughter who forgot their birthday. These women, so many of them. We'd sit in padded chairs and pretend we didn't feel like discarded paper dolls. But I watched them. I listened. Some had stories worse than mine. And some were fading because they had no reason to stay sharp anymore. No one waiting. No one needing them to be anything other than easy. I was lucky. I had a shoebox and a mission. And that was the difference between resignation and strategy. That was the difference between the ones who wait to die and the ones who wait to return. It was a Monday when I asked for the printer. That's how you move here, slowly in pieces under the radar. I'd started helping the activities coordinator fold paper programs for bingo night, a task I volunteered for not because I cared about bingo, but because it gave me 30 quiet minutes in the admin lounge with a creaky desk, a dusty desktop computer, and a little brother printer that worked when you hit it twice. I told them I liked the routine, said it reminded me of being a nurse, paperwork, ink filing. They nodded, grateful for any resident who wasn't asking for stronger pain meds or new batteries for their hearing aids. I used that time to print things that had nothing to do with bingo. Claire's old emails, Neil's court record, DUI expunged 2017, and a PDF copy of a property transfer document she thought I'd never find. Each paper felt like a slice of truth, and I handled them like they could bleed. She'd used a third-party trust to hide the sale of my house. Signed everything with her married name, not mine. Buried it under layers of corporate shielding. But even perfect crimes forget something small. In her case, it was a reference to my deceased husband's estate ID. She reused the same code in 2 filings. One in her trust documents, one in the old deed. It was a fingerprint she didn't know she left behind. And I knew exactly where to send that detail when the time came. I started collecting hard copies in a fresh file. No longer the shoebox. I moved it all into a plain manila envelope labeled Resident Medical Notes. Slid it into my drawer beneath a bundle of crossword puzzles and prayer cards. No one checked those drawers. No one even knocked. That's the blessing of becoming invisible. You can take up space right in front of them. And they won't see the weapon you're building until it's already in their back. But information alone isn't revenge. It's just ammunition. You need a delivery system. And for that, I needed help from someone who wasn't afraid of pushing a few buttons without asking questions. That's how I found Jamie. She was one of the night shift nurses, 28, maybe 30, with tired eyes and a black ink phoenix tattoo curling up the inside of her left arm. I caught her humming to Coltrane one night while adjusting someone's Ford drip, and that was it. We bonded over jazz and exhaustion. She was the type who kept her guard up like it owed her rent. Quiet, efficient, but not unkind. She liked that I didn't talk about my grandkids or ask her about her dating life. I liked that she didn't treat me like a relic. Just a woman who still had a mind in some bad joints. One night, around 2 a.m., I asked her if the facility Wi-Fi was monitored. She gave me a look. Not suspicious. Just curious. Why? She asked. Wanted to download an ebook. I lied. From an old private account. Didn't want it to raise flags. You're reading spicy novels now, Margaret? She grinned. I said private, not pornographic. She laughed. The next night, she brought me an old Kindle someone left behind. If it asks for a password, try Pinehill 123. It's the admin default. I didn't need the Kindle. What I needed was the hint, that password, because it worked on everything. The Wi-Fi, the staff computer, even a few online portals that still had admin login, enabled with default credentials. Sloppy but common. I used it carefully, one IP bounce at a time. DuckDuckGo incognito windows, a USB drive shaped like a crucifix. Fitting, given the sins I was about to resurrect. The more I found, the quieter I became. Silence makes people nervous. But I wasn't hiding. I was molting. I began skipping group meals. Ata in my room. Faked indigestion when I needed to. I lost 5 pounds in 2 weeks. Not from malice or illness but precision. I wanted to be light. I wanted to move like a ghost. At night, I began writing drafts, emails with attachments labeled redacted potential misconduct, addressed to 2 specific names: Jeremy Altman, Claire's co-founder, and Neil himself. But I never hit send. Not yet. Each time I typed out a subject line, I'd sit with it for 20 minutes and ask myself, is this revenge or just a scream? Because screaming is easy. What I wanted was permanence. So instead I rewatched the voicemail. It was buried in an old Gmail archive. Neil slurring his words, laughing. She thinks she's so untouchable, he said. But you should have seen her face when she forged that signature. She was shaking, like some damn teenager cheating a test. And then the kicker. She told me you'd never find out. Said you were too soft. That part made me close my eyes. Not from pain. From recognition. 'Cause maybe I had been. Once. I started printing copies of everything she'd hidden under company names, donor funds, and charitable expenses. There were photos of her attending events she claimed to have canceled for budget reasons, all dressed up in her PR mask, smiling wide. Tax records with odd discrepancies. One document suggesting a personal expense charged to the nonprofits card. A weekend retreat in Napa, listed under staff development, booked during the same week she told me she couldn't visit because of an emergency audit. I laughed so hard when I saw that I had to cover my mouth with a pillow. And every time I gathered another piece, I folded it like a confession and slipped it into the envelope. By the end of the month it was full. I added a return address, the name of a fake consulting firm. Then I sealed it, placed it inside a plain white padded envelope, and addressed it to Jeremy Altman's office. I didn't send it yet, because something told me I'd need to look her in the eye first. My birthday came in April, and the staff wheeled in a sheet cake with Happy 75th, Margaret, in pink frosting that tasted like chemicals and nostalgia. It was the kind of celebration designed to keep you from remembering who hadn't shown up, the kind where you're photographed holding a balloon you didn't ask for, flanked by nurses who've memorized your first name but don't know a single story behind it. They brought in a ukulele player who sang, "You Are My Sunshine," and I smiled through it, even though it felt like a eulogy with rhythm. Claire arrived 3 hours late, just as the last of the guests were wheeled back to their rooms. She wore designer sunglasses and carried a bakery box from a patisserie that didn't exist when I still had keys to my own front door. She acted surprised to see the half-eaten sheet cake, like she hadn't planned it that way. To arrive when the fanfare had faded, to be the star without competition. I watched her cross the common room with that same polished gait she'd perfected from years of fundraising galas and charity spotlights. A woman who knew how to perform warmth without ever stepping close enough to be burned by it. "Mom," she said, voice syrupy with guilt's artificial cousin obligation. "Happy birthday. I brought your favorite. Lemon chiffon." "My favorite is chocolate hazelnut," I replied, not unkindly. She blinked, recovered, smiled. "Well, they were out. You know how it is." She sat beside me, her perfume slicing the air with bergamot and money. I noted the ring on her finger, thicker, shinier. A replacement? An upgrade? She always traded up when something got too comfortable. I sipped my tea, lukewarm now, and let her prattle on about her latest speaking engagement, the recent award she'd won. How Families First had just signed a new partnership with a tech platform for digital caregiver tools. "You should see the app," she said. "It's incredible. Tracks medication, mood swings, even family visits, like a smart calendar for your care team." I didn't ask if I was on that calendar. Instead, I asked, "Does it track fraud too?" She froze just a second, then laughed too loudly. "You're always so dry, Mom." I smiled. "And you're always so wet with bullshit." Her eyes flickered. For a brief moment, the PR mask slipped. She shifted in her seat, scanned the room, then leaned in. "What are you trying to say?" "Nothing you don't already hear every night in your sleep." She stood quickly. "You know, I came here to do something nice. You don't make it easy." "I don't want nice," I said, still calm. "I want truth." "But you don't carry that flavor in your bakery box." She grabbed her purse and walked to the door, but not before glancing at the nurse's station, performative distress. I watched her disappear into the hallway, her heels clicking like accusations. Then I pulled out my phone, tapped open the email draft titled, "To Whom It May Concern," concerning the misuse of funds at Families First. I read it one last time. Then I hit send. One to Jeremy Altman. One to Neil. And one to a local gossip columnist with a hunger for nonprofit scandals and a reputation for getting the timing just right. The next morning it began. Neil's reply was the first. Just one line. What else do you have? Jeremy's assistant followed with a formal response requesting a meeting. The gossip columnist didn't respond at all. But by Thursday, a blog post was making rounds on social media. Local nonprofit under fire for questionable financial practices. Claire's name wasn't mentioned directly, but the breadcrumbs were there. Enough to get tongues wagging. Enough to split alliances. And I wasn't finished. That week I started volunteering in the front office. Just to stay busy, I told them. I filed forms, made calls, cleaned out drawers. Perfect cover for scanning and emailing archived pages that had nothing to do with residents and everything to do with Claire's tax filings, which she'd foolishly stored on a shared drive she assumed I couldn't access. They were old, but they painted a picture. Unreported income, dubious donation sources, and just enough inconsistency to stir legal curiosity. The staff here didn't question it. To them, I was just an old woman with too much time and a helpful streak. No one suspected the quiet little revolutions I was orchestrating behind the copy machine. And then came the gala. Claire's charity was set to host a televised awards dinner the following month. One of those sparkle-heavy events where she could wear a gown and pose with city officials who didn't care about integrity, only optics. Except suddenly the guest list began shrinking. Sponsors pulled out. The event quietly moved from a ballroom to a restaurant. Then eventually, it was postponed due to scheduling conflicts. I didn't gloat. That's not how you win. You win by becoming the one thing she never prepared for. Someone who knew how to wait. Claire called me 4 times that week. I didn't answer. On the 5th attempt, she left a voicemail. I don't know what you're doing, Mom. But if you think you're helping anyone, you're not. You're just bitter. Vindictive. You'll ruin everything I built. For what? Because I made a hard decision? Because I tried to protect you. I replayed it twice. Not for her words. For her voice. She sounded tired. Cracked. Like she hadn't slept in days. I saved the voicemail. Then I opened the shoebox one last time. Took out the love letter she wrote at 17 to a girl named Hannah. Folded in the shape of a heart, edges yellowed, never sent. That's the piece I hadn't used yet. The one she thought she destroyed in high school, long before she knew what she was capable of hiding. But I'd found it in her dresser when I cleaned her room, that summer she left for college. I never told her I kept it, because back then, I still believed she'd come back for her better self. Now I wasn't so sure. But I was ready. Ready for her to see me as more than a shadow. Ready for her to remember that the softest voice can still shatter glass. It was a Tuesday morning when the knock came. Not the kind the staff uses, timid and courteous, but a full impatient rap against the wood like someone who'd already decided you owed them an answer. I knew before I turned the handle. I'd felt it in the pressure drop all week, the emails that had gone silent, the press release that never surfaced, the photos that never posted. She stood in the hallway with her hair pulled back too tight and her smile unzipped. No make-up, no câmeras, no bakery boxes. Just Claire, raw and cornered. Her eyes scanned the hallway behind me, then met mine with something between contempt and desperation. We need to talk, she said, and before I could respond, she pushed her way past me into the room like it still belonged to her. She sat at the chair by the window, the one Evelyn used to fall asleep in during stormy afternoons, and crossed her arms so tight it looked like she was holding herself together from the outside in. Do you think you're clever? She started, not looking at me. Do you think this is justice? I didn't respond. I walked to the edge of the bed, sat down slowly, let my knees adjust. She stared at the shoebox on my dresser like it might open its mouth and bite her. They're investigating me now. Do you understand that? She hissed. Jeremy's frozen our accounts. The board has called an emergency meeting. Neil forwarded your email to the press. To everyone. You've destroyed everything I've built. I took a breath before I spoke. Not because I needed to calm myself, but because I wanted her to notice how calm I already was. You built it on other people's backs. You turned my home into a transaction. You turned me into a line item. If you hadn't been so greedy, I might have died here quietly with a thank you note clutched in my hands. Her jaw tightened. She leaned forward, elbows on knees. I was trying to protect you. Do you know how many people scam their parents? I was preventing that. Consolidating. Planning. You never handled finances well. I let that sit there like the insult it was, heavy and rehearsed. Is that what you tell yourself? I asked. That you were protecting me while siphoning off my pension and selling the house Dad built with his hands? She laughed short, dry, almost pitiful. You don't understand how the world works anymore. It's not 1970, Mom. It's branding. It's leverage. Do you know what it's like to run something like Families First? The pressure? The politics? I had to make decisions. I nodded. And I made one too. I reached for the envelope beneath the bed. The backup, already sealed and addressed to the State Oversight Committee. I didn't wave it. I just held it on my lap, visible but untouched, like a threat with manners. She saw it and went pale. Jesus Christ, what more do you want? She asked, voice trembling. Do you want me ruined? Homeless? You want me in here, is that it? You want me eating pudding and waiting for my bladder to give out? I stood then slowly, walked over to her side, and looked down at the woman who used to fall asleep on my chest after nightmares. The girl who once clung to my arm in grocery stores because the aisles were too wide and the world too loud. No, I said. I want you to remember. Remember who you were before the world taught you to erase people who couldn't keep up. She stared at me, and I saw something crack behind her eyes. Maybe recognition, maybe just fear. You think they'll forgive you for this? She whispered. You think Neil's going to stick around? That Jeremy won't throw you under the bus next? I tilted my head. Maybe not. But I won't be the one wondering who still believes me when the lights go off. She stood, moved toward the door, then turned. You're nothing without me. Just an old woman with a shoebox full of papers no one cares about. I stepped aside and opened the door for her. And yet I'm still the only one you're afraid of. She didn't respond. Just walked out, heels clicking like punctuation marks on a sentence she thought she was still writing. That night, the staff found me sitting on the edge of my bed. Envelope gone, shoebox half empty. The rest of the papers burning slowly in a metal waste bin I'd borrowed from the library. You okay, Margaret? Jamie asked, fanning the smoke with a clipboard. Better than I've been in years, I said. And I meant it. The story hit the papers a week later. Not scandalous enough for national news, but just enough local fallout to shutter the charity indefinitely. Claire's public statement was clinical, robotic. Due to unforeseen administrative complications, we are pausing operations. Jeremy filed a civil suit. Neil filed for divorce. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to. They were all scrambling now, trying to recast the script, looking for a version of the story where they came out clean. But the truth was out. And truth, once released, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to echo in the right rooms. I kept one thing from the shoebox, one letter, folded neatly in a Ziploc bag, hidden in my pillowcase like a relic. The rest I let burn, because this wasn't about burying her. It was about raising myself. And I wasn't done yet. There's a small cottage on the edge of town, tucked behind a church that stopped holding services when the last choir director passed. It's quiet there. No beeping monitors, no polished linoleum, no rotating shift changes. Just birdsong, the occasional knock from the mailman, and me. The lease is under a name that isn't mine. I never asked whose. But I recognized Neil's handwriting on the envelope that came with the first set of keys. No note. No explanation. Just a manila folder with property records. A receipt for 1 year of rent paid in full. And a typed line at the bottom. You were right. N. I didn't need to thank him. That wasn't what this was. Guilt has its own currency, and sometimes, it spins cleaner than love ever could. I accepted it because I needed a place to live. I kept it because I wanted a place to remember that I had survived. I moved out of Pine Hill quietly. No farewell party. No speeches. Just a long hug from Jamie, who looked at me like she wanted to ask what I'd done, but already knew she didn't want the answer. I left her a bottle of wine in the staff fridge with a note. You're not invisible. Don't let them treat you like you are. That was all. I packed my clothes, a few books, and one Ziploc bag with a folded letter inside it. The rest I left to ash in silence. The cottage is small. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a cracked porch swing, and a kitchen that still smells like the people who lived here before me. It's enough. I wake early, walk to the edge of the pond behind the church, read, Watch ducks quarrel over nothing. I sleep better than I have in years. Not because I'm at peace, not exactly, but because the war I was fighting isn't unfinished anymore. There are no more pieces of me left in the hands of someone else. That's what closure really is. Not forgetting. Reclaiming. The letter sat on my nightstand for weeks before I decided to send it. I'd unfolded it a dozen times. Read each line like a priest studying an ancient text, searching for original sin in the handwriting. 17-year-old Claire wrote it in purple ink, with hearts above every I. It started simply. Hannah, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I love you. It never reached its destination. She'd torn it up and thrown it in the trash the day she found it again after college. But I'd retrieved it, taped it back together, because it was the last honest thing she ever wrote. I don't know if she remembers Hannah, or if she still thinks about the version of herself who could have loved that openly, that sweetly. Maybe she buried that girl beneath all the things she built to survive. Maybe she had to. The world's cruel to women who don't follow the script. Maybe she became a tyrant to avoid becoming a victim. That doesn't absolve her, but it does explain some of the edges. So I sealed the letter in a plain white envelope. No return address. No note. Just the letter. Just that heartbeat frozen in time. And I mailed it to her office, though I knew she wouldn't be there anymore. Someone would forward it. Maybe she'd open it on a bad day. Maybe she'd cry. Maybe she'd tear it up all over again. Or maybe she'd remember the person she used to be before money, before press releases, before betrayal had to wear a smile to survive. That was my final act. Not revenge. Not a warning. Just remembrance. Because if there's one thing I've learned in 75 years, it's that people don't rot from wounds, they rot from forgetting who they were before the wound. And I wanted her to remember. Not for my sake. For hers. I don't expect reconciliation. I don't expect her to knock on my door or fall to her knees or apologize through tears. Those are movie things. This is life. Sometimes you just send a letter and hope the silence that follows is different than the silence that came before. A week after I mailed it, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a photo of Claire as a child, 6 years old, in her pink overalls and grass-stained shoes, holding a frog she was too afraid to kiss. I remember that day. She cried when we made her put it back in the creek. There was no note, but on the back of the photo were 4 words written in fine blue ink. She was real once. That's all I needed. The photo now sits on my bookshelf, beside a candle and a ceramic frog I found at the farmer's market. It reminds me of 2 things, that people break and that sometimes they leave behind pieces that are still worth holding. I'm not a hero in this story. And I'm not a victim either. I'm just a woman who refused to disappear. A woman who carried a box full of memories and made sure they landed where they needed to. Quietly. Precisely. With the kind of love that doesn't forgive but doesn't forget either. This is my piece. Doesn't look like justice. It doesn't look like revenge. It looks like a cottage at the end of the road, a folded letter in the mail, and a frog on a shelf. It looks like freedom. If this story hit you where it hurts, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. What would you have done if you were Margaret? We release new stories like this every week. True confessions, slow burn revenge, and emotional redemptions you won't forget. See you in the next one.